This episode of Wheat Pete's Word is brought to you by Syngenta and Miravis Neo Fungicide. Get the all-in-one jug solution for your corn. With over 5 years of successfully helping corn farmers protect against leaf diseases, including control of tar spot and fusarium, Miravis Neo helps put more bushels in your bin. Visit syngenta.ca for more information.
Good day, and welcome to Wheat Pete's Word here on Real Agriculture for Wednesday, July the 30th. On this episode of Word, so much fun! And we'll shift gears entirely, and we have to talk about stress because it is out there. And then a couple of no, tell me no! And after that, we've got lots of agronomy to talk about. It's agronomy, agronomy, and agronomy. Let's go! Yes, I just love doing the Word. It is the highlight of my week because it is so cool, the feedback that I get. So currently, both Franz and Andres from South Africa, if you can imagine, are kibitzing with me, going back and forth. Franz is looking at some disease issues, some leaf injury issues. Andres is looking for ways to mitigate drought stress. Such an interesting situation. By the way, their wheat in South Africa right now is at boot stage. They are, of course, fairly high up. And in Andres' situation, he's got irrigation, but they plant in late April. And until late August, because of how high they are, the temperature can drop as low as -4. And then by September the 10th, things have just totally flipped, and their high temperatures can be as high as 42 degrees Celsius, and their lows are typically 20 degrees at night, and that's in their grain fill period. So temperature stress, how do we deal with temperature stress? And the easy answer is, well, get your wheat to head earlier, but he did that once, and it got frozen out, -4, late August rather. So it, just phenomenally interesting. It's not just that. I mean, I talked to my good friend Mark in Delmarva. William from Quebec is reaching out to me. Dwayne in Saskatchewan. And we're having impact. James at Cache Bay sending a tweet with a link to Wheat Pete's Word from last week saying, snowcat ordered. So that's the triticale that we think is resistant to snow mold. So man, please keep it coming. And by the way, I couldn't do it without all the feedback, without all the support. So thank you to everyone for giving me that and for letting me, come into your lives for a short period once a week and banter away with all this agronomic stuff. But it is just so much fun. Shift gears. Unfortunately, there is so much stress out there. And just got word of another farmer, Middlesex County, lost their life to suicide. There is so much stress, and it's so important for us to build the agricultural community. So, for example, Mitchell, we had just tremendous downburst of wind there. Corn snapped off, trees snapped off. We have edible beans that snapped off. 10% of edible bean plants. They're only 18 inches high, and they snapped off right at the ground. 20% of corn in some fields is green snapped. Talk about stress. Meanwhile, we go to central Ontario, and it is unbelievably dry. Well, actually, not just in central Ontario. So Dan Petker, Norfolk Sands, corn 3 feet tall and fully tasseled. Well, as fully tasseled as 3 foot tall corn can get. I think that corn, it doesn't even make good silage. It's just way too short for that, and there's not much livestock down there anyway. And you move into central Ontario, that Lindsay area, only 3/8 of an inch of rain in over 60 days, and a lot of that area is super shallow soils. I mean, if you were listening to this podcast in Iowa, you're saying, well, 3/8 of an inch of rain in 60 days, that's dry, but but you have 11 feet of topsoil and you have lots of subsoil moisture. Some of those soils out there are sometimes a foot deep, sometimes 2 feet deep, sometimes only 6 inches over bedrock, 3/8 of an inch of rain. You are in massive trouble. James Daou tweeting out a picture from the Environment Canada website. That region in central Ontario is a 90% deviation to the minus, so negative 90% from the 60-day normal. So yeah, it's incredibly dry. And then you look at that same map, and Essex Kent is 60% above normal rainfall. Now, it doesn't get up into Elgin because my good friend Albert Tenuta lives just close to the Elgin-Kent border, and he is whining about being dry. He's almost whining about being dry as much as our good friend Adam Pfeffer from Bearhoft. Adam is known for saying how dry it is on his farm. Actually, this year he is in pretty good shape. And then you look at northern Ontario and parts of Quebec, and if you can imagine, they are over 125% of normal rainfall for the last 60 days. So talk about stress. It is just incredible. Add to that wheat prices. Oh, I can't tell you how many people have said, Pete, we love growing wheat, but with these prices, we will have less wheat acres. We just are not making money growing wheat. We have to make money, and at a negative income margin, which we just get pushed out of it despite all the good we know that it does. That's really hard to take. So, finishing up this downer part of it, for goodness sakes, use your Wheat Pete 15 or whatever you do to build the agricultural community, but pick up the phone and call somebody. If you know somebody in that Mitchell area, call them up and just say, are you okay? I know you've had some bad weather. Are you okay? Or other areas with bad weather. If you know someone in central Ontario, if you know, like, just pick up the phone. I don't care if you didn't talk to them for 2 or 3 or 10 years even. My brother Paisley actually had someone call, I think I mentioned this earlier, that he hadn't talked to in over 10 years, and they just called up out of the blue, and it just picked them right up. So ask if they're okay, because the stress is real. Okay, let's shift gears and have a bit more fun here. So my great friend Bob Thirlwall with Bear had a meeting with, or was at a meeting rather, with him yesterday. And as we're walking in, he says, "Oh, Pete, I got something for you." And he goes to his truck and he gets 4 cobs of corn. His sweet corn is ready. And so it was excellent sweet corn, Bob. We had it last night. Thank you so much. Very, very kind. And my last note is, as people in agriculture, please think about it and be kind. We talk about road safety, and we've talked about, be kind on the road. Do what you can to facilitate reasonable traffic, whether you're in the right of way or not. Being courteous always counts. And I will add to this, be kind as wheat is coming off and manure is getting spread. The odor is just sometimes awful. And if you can work it in the day you apply it, and I know some people will say we just don't have the time. I get that everybody's busy, but if you are close to a small town or a village, or there's, a half a dozen houses in the area, and you know that the smell is horrendous, because sometimes it is, be kind, find the time, work it in the day of application, or better yet, figure out how to inject it. You'll lose a lot less nitrogen if you can inject it, and you'll be much, much more courteous to your neighbors. All right, here's a real opportunity. There's a compaction day coming up on August the 7th. St. Clair Region Soil and Crop Improvement Association is putting on a compaction. I think it's the only compaction day this year. For those of you listening that have been to one, you're going to say, like, oh yeah, those days are incredible. You learn so much. And Pete talks about compaction, but until you actually see it for yourself, it doesn't have the same impact. It won't resonate in your brain. So August the 7th, 10 a.m., Jackson Seeds are the host. They're Rutherford Elevator. You can look it up online. We can put a link in the post, but if you can, get there, because those days are just so much fun, and you will learn so much. All right. Now let's get into the no part of Wheat Pete's Word this week. First up, confirmed case of Palmer amaranth in Lambton County, and apparently the site is very heavily infested. So this is not good news if you know pigweed. We've been having trouble with pigweed this year. You can see the pigweed poking up above the canopy, and we talk lots about water hemp. Those that have it understand. Those that don't have it or haven't seen it, you just think, oh, how can it be that bad? But water hemp is pigweed on steroids. It's got so many more growing points at every leaf axil. It branches out so much more. It grows so much faster. And you think, well, that's horrendous. And then you see Palmer amaranth. And Palmer amaranth, it's like water hemp on steroids. I'm not sure what the right analogy is, but it's sort of the giant pigweed of the pigweed family. If you know giant ragweed, how it's 7-8 feet tall, and common ragweed is 3 or 4 feet tall. Well, Palmer amaranth is the same as giant ragweed, how fast it grows, how aggressive it is. So this is not good news, and something we're going to have to start watching out for. The next, no, tell me it isn't so. It is not legal, simply not legal in Canada to apply pesticides. That's any pesticide. That's a fungicide, that's a herbicide, that's an insecticide, with a drone. It's not legal, and yet I understand there's lots of it being done. So if you're a drone sprayer doing it, you can lose your license 100%. But what's worse than that is that the efficacy may not be very good. If you look at the trials that Jason DeVoe has done on drone spraying, there's so many things that can go wrong. We talked a little while ago, Ziam Uglik from Wisconsin did some drift data, a 6-mile-per-hour wind, and on a small set of nozzles, they could get just almost all of it drifting away. And we're using low water volumes with drones. We have variable speeds on the propellers, so the wash is not constant. The latest research by Jason is showing some promise. We're getting these things solved. But man, we had trouble last year with tar spot in corn, where the helicopter, the spread pattern was not as wide as they thought, and we had some significant yield losses because of poor tar spot control. And the problem is, with most things you apply, if you apply a fungicide for white mold on your edible beans with a drone, you will never know whether that drone gave you good coverage or not, because it's so hard to see in the crop. The yield monitor will tell you that the crop didn't yield the way that you wanted, but you just don't know. And until we get this thing sorted, man, it's just, it may not tramp, but if you don't get good coverage, if you don't get the product onto the weed that you're trying to kill or the plant that you're trying to protect, man, it just doesn't work. Okay, so Bob, pushing back hard at my time of day spraying on fungicides. He says, Pete, Bex has data that if you apply a fungicide in the morning on the dew, that you will get better control. So Bob, I looked at that data, and it is a really interesting study. So I'm coming at it from an Ontario perspective. And if you're an Ontario grower, if I say the words delta T to you, you kind of look at me and say, what have you been smoking, Mr. Johnson? Like, oh, I don't understand. If I go to Alberta and I say the words delta T, they just say, oh yeah, if delta T is too high, we don't spray. Just full stop, we don't spray. And it's because when you have low humidity conditions, and you give off small droplets, they evaporate so much of the water droplet that it gets so small that it just drifts away and it never gets to the target. So in that Bex data, Bob, I looked at it, and I don't know what nozzles they were using, what droplet size they were using, but their 3 p.m. time of day spraying, the delta T was in the use caution part of the curve. Like it wasn't a full stop, but it was, man, you're really, like, you are going to lose some droplets. The early morning application, the delta T was in the ideal range. And in Ontario, if you look at the herbicide data, we get the best control in the middle of the day, and that's because the wax on the leaf is more viscous. I talked about this last week, but if delta T was a problem here, then we would get better control, because both the fungicide and the herbicide, and in some cases the insecticide, have to get into the plant to work. So if the herbicide gets in middle of the day, then there's a really good chance the fungicide is going to get better into the plant middle of the day. But if you're in Iowa, then probably the morning is better because of this delta T phenomenon. And so it's a really great question, Bob. I love it, but I still think here, middle of the day for fungicides is going to be the best, because I just don't see how it can be different than herbicides. Okay, moving on. Chris from Eastern Ontario reaching out and saying, okay, Peter, want to order my wheat seed for this coming fall. You know, it's almost August. We're soon going to be there. So tell me, what's the latest on seeding rates? What's the science? And John Mark in Essex also reaching out saying, how early is too early in Essex? You always say less seed when I can plant early. I'm going to plant winter wheat after my winter canola. Now there's a sweet rotation, because wheat after canola is always amazing. And we're going to get wheat after canola, and it's winter canola, it's winter wheat. That's cool. But here's the deal. So Chris says that on his heavy clay in Eastern Ontario, the standard recommendation is 1.8 to 2 million seeds per acre. Okay, so just stop. Let's define heavy clay, because Jean-Marc also has heavy clay. If your wheat will lodge, you don't have heavy clay. If you are on Jean-Marc or Kevin's or Brad's really heavy clay in Lambton, in Essex, in the Niagara Peninsula, man, you just about cannot lodge wheat. And if your land is like that, where it's almost impossible to lodge it, then I believe you have heavy clay. And then you have to keep seeding rates higher. There's just 25% more seed on that heavy clay. But if you're on some of that heavy clay in Eastern Ontario, that is heavy clay, but it's different than the heavy clay in the deep Southwest, and it just seems to produce more growth, man, if you're wheat will lodge, I don't count you as heavy clay. So Chris saying that he used to always be at 1.8 to 2 million. He had good success this year with 1.5 to 1.6 million, and he wants to try 1.4 to 1.5. Cool. Try 1.4. You had good success with 1.5. Good success rather with 1.5. I think you stay at 1.5. There's the latest data from Michigan State would suggest that for the most part we are using more seed than we need to use, and it's like buying insurance. But the other thing to remember, and I hope 97.8% or more of you are all screaming, but Pete, you didn't talk about planting date. And yes, planting date makes a huge difference. So Chris, when you say did well this year at 1.5, did you plant earlier than normal? So go to Go Crops, look at your optimum seeding date, and if you planted early and that's the reason you got away with 1.5, then make sure your soybeans are early, so you're going to have that opportunity again. If we get late, you have to pump that seeding rate up. There's just no doubt about that. Jean-Marc, how early is too early? Go to Go Crops, look at when your optimum seeding date is. If your optimum seeding date probably is about October the 10th, so I really don't want you to plant before September the 30th unless there's all sorts of rain coming. And if it's September the 15th and you're looking at the forecast and there is a hurricane moving up and we're going to get 27 inches of rain starting 3 days from now, just go plant the dang wheat. But if you can plant it within 10 days of your optimum date, that is the optimum window. If you're that 10 days early on your truly heavy clays, you'd normally stay at 1.8 to 2 million. But certainly, if you're that early, 1.5 is easily enough. And if you're on a loam soil, man, and you go 10 days early, 0.8. 800,000 seeds per acre is probably enough. Okay, this is a long rendition on that, but it was a good question, and I like the fact that these growers are thinking about planting wheat early. Brent with chicken litter saying, okay, Pete, I always put my chicken litter on before corn in the spring, but I'm wondering if it would be better to put it on in the late fall. And what's the parameters there? And he sent me the manure test. So good for you, Brent. And by the way, I love your thinking. Put it on in the fall because we can do it when it's dry, we don't compact, and we can plant the corn on time. The stupid manure isn't in our way. However, from a nitrogen standpoint, Brent's manure is really interesting. It's 10 pounds per ton of ammonium nitrogen, so immediately available, just like fertilizer nitrogen, 40 pounds per ton of organic. Wow, that's more organic nitrogen than we would normally expect in chicken manure, but there is, unfortunately, on the manure test, no carbon to nitrogen ratio. If I don't know the carbon to nitrogen ratio, man, I cannot tell you for sure what to do. If you're using sawdust shavings and that carbon to nitrogen ratio is 50-1 or 30-1, the nitrogen, that organic nitrogen, is not going to become readily available, and so fall application wins. If, however, your carbon to nitrogen ratio is 15-1 or 10-1, the way it often is with chicken litter, and you put that on in the fall, you will lose a lot more nitrogen. So from a nitrogen perspective, then spring chicken litter application would be better. But then the compaction, the delayed corn planting, yeah, both of those are issues. And by the way, Chris Brown, who I discussed this with, the nutrient management specialist with the Ministry of Agriculture and Food, said, Peter, don't forget, if they're going to put it on in the fall, tell them to grow a cover crop. And Brent, I expect you're doing that, but absolutely. Talking about cover crops, both Glenn and Joshua reaching out saying, Pete, what do I plant? What's the right cover crop blend? And in Joshua's case, by the way, he has ragweed in his wheat stubble. This is your reminder. Alert, alert, alert. Make sure that you kill any annual weeds in your wheat stubble before they go to seed. And again, Adam, my great counterpart scouting, out looking at a wheat stubble field yesterday, Monday perhaps, and said, oh, Pete, the nightshade. We have some little nightshade in the wheat stubble. It's already flowering. And I'm going like, oh my gosh. So you got to get it before it goes to seed. And vertical tillage, high-speed discs, do not give 100% control. So, man, a pass over the field with glyphosate 2,4-D or glyphosate Lontrell or something to make sure you kill those weeds and don't let them set seed, I think is really, really important. Anyway, that's enough on that. So in Joshua's case, he's no forage involved, whatever. And to me, as long as you have oats there, you're going to do about as good as you can. Now, one of the problems with oats is they do get a lot of rust, right? And so if you say, well, what about barley? Yeah, do spring barley. It would be fine as well. I like oats. They're a bit more mycorrhizal. They're a little bit easier to come by. And we do have some varieties. So when you pick that variety of oats, I really encourage you to go crops, look up the oat varieties that have good resistance to crown rust, and use one of those varieties as your seed, because then you won't have to worry about all the stupid rust and the stuff turning yellow in the field, or actually red in the field, orange in the field from the rust. In Glenn's case, he wants to plant rye, cereal rye. He wants to cut it for forage this fall. He wants to cut it for forage next spring. And Glenn, I think that's awesome. I think that's great. There was a good Twitter discussion. Jim said add oats, because if we add oats, then we can get better forage, more forage volume in the fall. The rye will be there for next spring. I think that's awesome. Blake's saying add millet or sorghum right now, and so that would be another option. They're warm season grasses. I sort of like the oats better, although rust in the oats, we still have to watch that. But the other common thread throughout all of that discussion, and if you're going to grow oats as a cover crop, Josh, Glenn, whoever, remember the work by Dave Hooker on these cover crop trials. We need fertility, and in particular 50 pounds of nitrogen. Otherwise, the oat growth can actually be a detriment. It can reduce corn yields next spring. So whether it's manure, I don't care how you get it, but 50 pounds of nitrogen on these cover crops to make sure we don't get into any problems. And with that, oh my gosh, I've gone on too long and I've only covered half of what I should have covered. That's it. That's all. On behalf of the team here at Real Agriculture, this is Wheat Pete with the word for Wednesday, the 30th of July. Thanks for listening and making my day. And to those of you who send me messages, thank you even more, because that even more makes my day. We'll talk to you next week. Have a good one.
This episode of Wheat Pete's Word was brought to you by Syngenta. Do you know what drives your corn yield engine? Discover how combining an improved understanding of where yield comes from with high-performing Syngenta corn crop solutions like Miravis-Neo Fungicide can give you traction towards better corn yields and profitability. Visit syngenta.ca for more information.